Our defenses must be adequate, not just today, but tomorrow and in all the years to come.
On October 4th, 1957, the USSR launched an R-7 ballistic rocket towards the upper atmosphere. On this rocket was a small silver ball called Sputnik. This would become the first man-made object to ever enter space. Despite the only thing this little silver ball could do was beep and flash a little red light, Americans still lost their shit when they heard that Russia had launched a satellite into space. This was known as the Sputnik crisis. Many citizens acted like they'd just been doxxed and their internet search history had been leaked, when in reality, Russia was really just doing this to show America that they were better than them and basically flexing on the camera. So when this happened, America started tweaking heavy. So they decided to launch their own satellite into space that also did nothing. It was Explorer 1. Exactly like Sputnik, this John literally did nothing at all. It was just done so Russia would just shut their goofy ass up. But this wasn't the end of the beef for America, because just months later, Dwight D. Eisenhower would sign a bill authorizing the creation of NASA. He would then go even harder and create two space security programs. One focused on the US Air Force's ability to militarize space and make real-life Star Wars, and the other was a collab with the CIA to begin using satellites to gain intelligence on the Soviet Union. Now at this point, the Russians realized that this altercation just got real. So they launched Luna 2, which became the first space probe to go to the moon. I mean, this thing literally just crashed into the moon. Like, they just launched it and it just hit the surface of the moon. It did literally nothing besides run into the moon. Due to this being entirely pointless, the United States didn't really give a fuck. There's actually a famous quote from a Dwight D. Eisenhower speech, who was the president at the time, where in 1959 he is quoted as saying, "Damn, that was lame as hell," in response to Russia launching the Luna 2 into the surface of the moon. After this, both sides decided to pretty much just chill for about 2 years until Russia decided to get real in 1961. Hey, what's up, and welcome to Yannick YouTube. Today, we're going to be talking about the space race, and more importantly, all the fatal things that happened to mainly the Russian cosmonauts during this time period. If you like this video, make sure to like and subscribe, and if you have any suggestions on other topics you want me to cover, make sure to drop them in the comments. In the early 1960s, Russia began trying to launch humans into space in an attempt to be the first nation to have a man orbit around the Earth. While they would eventually succeed in 1961, a lot of suspect things happened before that. One example of this is when a rocket exploded on the launch pad, killing the crew and 78 other surrounding workers. But we all know Russia and how they get up to some shady antics, so it's widely believed that many more Russian astronauts, or cosmonauts as they're called, were killed during the space race. During this time period, two Italian brothers, who were amateur radio operators, began monitoring transmissions between Russia and the aircraft they had launched into space. One afternoon, the Soviet Union had launched Korabl Sputnik 1, a supposedly unmanned test flight. However, the brothers picked up a transmission that sounded like someone crying for help from inside of the aircraft. After they listened to the transmissions and deciphered the Morse code, they figured out that the Russians had launched a cosmonaut too far into space, and instead of orbiting the Earth, they were shot out into space and lost forever. Dang, that is spooky. I mean, imagine being a cosmonaut thinking you're about to just go orbit the Earth for a few days, and then you get like shot into a star or something. Anyway, of course Russia claimed that this was an unmanned flight, and the spacecraft hadn't been launched out of orbit, but instead the guidance system steered it in the wrong direction, which made it impossible to retrieve. So basically, it was just floating in space, but it was in a spot that it couldn't come back to Earth. So essentially, it got shot into space. They just said it differently, but politicians, man. These brothers claim to have up to 9 recordings of cosmonauts dying in space, including one where a female cosmonaut is heard asking if she is about to explode while seeing flames outside her cockpit. While it's unclear if these recordings are real or a hoax, it's still very interesting. Now, for most of these allegations, the Russians actually had some answers, so they must have put some good-ass lawyers on this case. For example, the Korabl Sputnik 1, which is the one that apparently got launched into space, actually had no re-entry shield, allegedly, which means that they were never planning on the craft returning to Earth. But if they were never planning on it returning to Earth, then why would they want to retrieve it? Because they said the guidance system steered it somewhere where it couldn't be retrieved, but why would they want to retrieve it if it was just going to burn upon re-entry? Also, some of the other crafts that were claimed to have people inside of them that died actually were shown to not have a lot of room in them, which makes it very hard, if even impossible, for a cosmonaut to fit inside and actually be shot into space. So was this all just Cold War propaganda, or did some of this stuff actually happen? For me, personally, I'd say it's about 50-50, because we all know America hit us with some propaganda crisis actor type shit. But also, I feel like I could definitely see the Russians covering something like this up. I mean, you wouldn't want to know that you're gonna suck at sending people to space, really, when you're trying to be that guy, you know what I'm saying? So now, fast forward to after 1969, after America, got their dub on Russia when Lance Armstrong and Buzz Lightyear landed on the moon. So basically, Russia knew they had to respond. And actually, the craziest thing happened. Russia made a fire-ass diss track on America. It was insane. It actually happened, but it would have been pretty sick. Instead, Russia came up with a plan to be the first nation to have men live in a space station that orbited the Earth. So after constructing this space station, they created a mission to send 3 men to live on the space station for 23 days. And this mission was known as Soyuz 11. As planned, the crew of Soyuz 11 went into space and lived in Russia's space station for 23 days. They then returned to Earth. Pretty much everything on the mission had gone completely according to plan. There were no hiccups or problems of any sort. However, when Russia went to recover the crew from their landing craft, they found that all 3 cosmonauts were dead. This was really unexpected because, like I said, everything had gone swimmingly, no problems were encountered during the mission. Now, when word of this got out, obviously, people began to speculate. The chief of NASA's astronaut corps at the time theorized that the psychological pressure of being in space for so long had actually just caused the men to straight up die. Like, the pressure of just being in space, not like physical pressure, like mental pressure, had caused them to just straight up croak. Some other people also theorized that a toxic substance had leaked into the men's capsule on re-entry, and that had been what killed them. However, it wasn't until 4 years later when the men's cause of death was figured out to be a ruptured breathing valve, which essentially tore the ship open and exposed them to the vacuum of space. Now, what this did was cause the pressure inside the craft to drop like crazy. I mean, they might as well have just been in space with nothing surrounding them. As you can probably guess, being in space, naked basically, isn't too good for you. So when the men got exposed to the empty vacuum of space, a lot of bad shit happened. The pressure change inside the cockpit would have immediately caused the men's lungs and eardrums to burst, and they would have felt this pain, because obviously that's not going to straight up kill you. So they would have had their lungs and eardrums explode. They would have felt it and they would not have been able to breathe. And the worst part is that blood would start leaking out of their mouth and ears, and they would choke on their own blood. Now, as I said, these 3 men would have felt everything. They would have felt the pain in their chest and head when their eardrums and lungs exploded, and then they would have started choking on their own blood. And this would have lasted for 60 seconds, a full minute, until the gas bubbles that formed in their veins would cause them to lose consciousness. Now, this might come as a bit of a surprise, but the men actually died from this injury, and it was concluded that the men died 104 miles above Earth's atmosphere, which makes them the only known people to have died in actual space, which is kind of crazy. I mean, I figured it would be like more than that, more than 3. But when you think about it, most people die either in re-entry or, takeoff. So I guess it does make sense, except for Apollo 14. They died in space too, to alien rocks, I think. The only silver lining that came from this was that the Russians figured out that their automatic landing sequence worked, because obviously the men inside were dead, and the craft was still able to re-enter Earth, deploy its parachute, and make it to ground without, exploding or crashing. Damn, I mean, that actually is some heavy stuff right there. I mean, I'm definitely gotta rethink if I want to become an astronaut, but actually, now that I think about it, they were probably just sitting there, digging in their butt cheeks or something, and then they got sucked to death. You know what I mean? Like, that's not that bad. Alright guys, that's gonna be all for this video. I hope you enjoyed learning a little bit about how the Russians suck at going to space. Obviously, if you liked the video, make sure you like and subscribe. And like I said, leave some suggestions in the comments on topics you might want me to cover, at another time. But that's gonna be all for now. See you guys next time. Peace.